Baseball calls itself America's pastime. But here's the twist: its roots stretch back across the Atlantic to the green fields of England. Some say a Civil War general named Abner Doubleday invented it in Cooperstown. Others credit a fireman named Alexander Cartwright with writing the rules. The truth: neither man invented baseball. Because baseball wasn't born in one moment. It didn't spring from the mind of a single genius. It slowly became baseball, shaped by myths, by soldiers in war camps, by crowds in rowdy cities, and by a nation searching for a game it could call its own. To really understand when baseball became baseball, we have to rewind to 18th century England. Out on village greens and open fields, bat and ball games ruled the day. Cricket and rounders. Cricket was already highly organized by then, with carefully defined wickets, 3 stumps, and to bails, bowlers delivering the ball with precision, umpires enforcing rules, and teams alternating innings. It had the structure of a national pastime, a sport with staying power. Rounders, by contrast, was less formal, but far closer in spirit to what Americans would one day call baseball. Batters struck the ball and sprinted around bases. Fielders chased after it to record outs. The action was faster, more improvised, and more focused on base running than the long duels of cricket. For young players in Britain and Ireland, rounders was the game of choice. And yet, unlike cricket, it never matured into a global sport. Its footprint remained small, its rules inconsistent, and its cultural reach limited. When English settlers carried their traditions across the Atlantic, Americans didn't adopt cricket wholesale. Instead, they improvised. By the early 1800s, towns throughout the Northeast had created their own bat and ball variations, each with distinct quirks. In Philadelphia, Boston, and rural Massachusetts, games like town ball and base became popular Sunday recreations. The rules were wildly different from place to place. Some versions were played on square fields instead of diamonds. In others, fielders could put runners out not by tagging them, but by hurling the ball directly at them, a practice known as soaking or plugging. Imagine trying to steal second base and being nailed in the back by a fast-thrown ball. It was rough, chaotic, and uniquely American. Even stranger, many early games had no foul territory. A batter could hit the ball in any direction, forward, sideways. Even behind Hyman, the play would still count. Strategy was limited, defense was messy, and the contests often devolved into long, high-scoring affairs. These were not yet the carefully measured battles we see on today's diamonds. They were neighborhood pastimes, shaped by local customs, played for fun and bragging rights more than for trophies or leagues. But they mattered, because in those improvised rules and homemade fields, the DNA of baseball was already present. No one in 1830s Massachusetts or New York could have predicted that these playful, unruly contests would evolve into the defining sport of a nation. Yet in hindsight, the seeds had been planted. The idea of striking a ball, running bases, and recording outs was already there, waiting to be refined, standardized, and transformed into the game we recognize today. The true turning point came in New York City during the 1840s, when the chaos of countless local bat and ball games finally began to take shape. In 1845, a group of young men, bank clerks, merchants, and firemen banded together to form the Knickerbocker Baseball Club. Unlike the rough, loosely organized versions of town ball played elsewhere, the Knickerbockers wanted a game with structure, balance, and clear rules. They chose to play on a diamond-shaped field, abandoning the old square layouts of Massachusetts games. They introduced the idea of foul territory, which gave the game order and defined where a ball could be fairly played. And most importantly, club member Alexander Cartwright sat down and wrote out a codified set of 20 rules, first written laws of what we would recognize as baseball. These rules specified 9 innings per game, 3 outs per inning, and bases set in a fixed order. The following year, in June of 1846, the Knickerbockers faced another club, the New York Nine, in Hoboken, New Jersey. By modern standards, it was a simple contest, but to the players and spectators, it marked a revolution. For the first time, the game looked strikingly familiar. Batters running counterclockwise around 4 bases, pitchers delivering underhand tosses, and teams trading outs across 9 structured innings. Later generations would cling to origin myths. Some claimed that Abner Doubleday, a Civil War general, invented baseball in Cooperstown in 1839. Others insisted that Cartwright himself was the father of the game, but historians now agree those stories are legends. Baseball did not spring from the genius of a single man. Instead, it was the product of a collective effort, hammered out on New York fields where clubs refined, debated, and adjusted the rules every time they met. By the 1850s, this New York game began to spread beyond Manhattan and Brooklyn. Clubs in other cities saw the appeal of standardized rules and adopted them. For the first time, different towns could play each other without confusion or dispute. Baseball was no longer just a pastime with dozens of local variations. It was becoming a sport with a shared language, recognizable to any American who stepped onto the diamond. This was the moment the game began to transcend its roots. Baseball was still young, still evolving, but thanks to the Knickerbockers and their rules, it finally had a framework sturdy enough to grow into something far bigger. Then came the American Civil War, and with it, baseball's biggest push toward becoming a national game. Soldiers from both the North and the South carried bats and balls in their packs, playing whenever they had free time. Union camps, Confederate prison sheriff men were gathered, baseball broke out. There are lithographs showing Union soldiers playing behind prison fences, and photographs of volunteers with the game unfolding in the background. For troops facing the horrors of war, baseball was more than a distraction. It was a taste of home, a piece of normal life preserved in the chaos. When the war ended in 1865, the game didn't stay confined to New York anymore. Soldiers returned home and brought baseball with them into the Midwest, down south, and out west. Newspapers began calling it a baseball fever. By the end of the war, America had discovered its sport. Baseball was no longer just a local New York curiosity. It was now spreading like wildfire across the country. By the late 1850s and early 1860s, baseball had already started looking familiar to us. In 1858, Brooklyn's best 9 players faced New York's best 9 in what many historians call the first All-Star game. Crowds paid to watch, something unheard of just a decade earlier. In 1860, a championship match between two rival clubs drew such a raucous audience that the New York Times complained about the behavior of cranks, the early name for fans who booed, cheered, and heckled umpires. Sound familiar? It should. The culture of fandom we know today was already in place. At the same time, newspapers began printing box scores, tabulating who pitched, who hit, and who scored. For the first time, fans could follow their favorite teams not just at the ballpark, but on the printed page. Terms like innings, strikes, and outs became part of the American vocabulary. What had once been a loose collection of bat and ball games was now a recognizable sport with rules, stars, and a growing fan base. Baseball wasn't just being played, it was being watched, debated, and celebrated. It was well on its way to becoming the national pastime. The final push came in 1869 with the birth of the Cincinnati Red Stockings' first openly professional baseball team. Every player on the roster was paid a salary, and together they barnstormed across the country, finishing the season undefeated. Fans packed ballparks to see them play, marveling at their bright uniforms and polished teamwork. For the first time, baseball wasn't just a pastime, it was a profession. The Red Stockings proved something vital. Baseball could be more than recreation. It could be entertainment, business, and national spectacle. Their success inspired other clubs to follow suit, and soon the line between amateur and professional ball all but disappeared. By the 1870s, leagues were forming, rules were tightening, and the first real baseball stars were emerging. Crowds grew larger, the competition fiercer, and the money bigger. The casual game of New York boys had become a nationwide obsession, played on enclosed fields, with fans paying at the gate to watch history unfold inning by inning. By 1876, the National League was established, and with it, the final building blocks of the modern game clicked into place. The bases were set 90 feet apart. Teams played 9 innings. Pitchers, who once lobbed the ball underhand, now threw overhand with speed and precision. Batters faced a defined strike zone. From the stands, the scene looked unmistakably familiar. Uniforms, scorecards, rivalries, and a crowd roaring with every hit. Baseball had crossed the threshold. It was no longer just a pastime, it was an institution. And yet, the answer to our question isn't a single date or a single inventor. Baseball didn't begin in one moment. It became baseball through a long process, born from English games, molded in New York, spread by Civil War soldiers, and solidified by the first professionals. By the late 19th century, Americans everywhere could look at the diamond and recognize their national game. Baseball had become baseball, and from that point on, it was here to stay.